bad, actually. I'm pretty good with jet lag for some weird reason. I think also just because melatonin tablets work really well for me. So it's not been too bad.
Nice. All right, so since we started recording, let's go ahead and dive into the agenda. We can chit chat at the end.
Excellent, wonderful. Welcome to another episode of the Agones community meeting stuff. Oh God, I'm not doing well. Let me take things away.
Sure. So we skipped last month because of GDC. We haven't met in a couple of months. We've got a few things on the agenda today. The first one I stuck on here was it's been a while since we've talked about feature promotions. I left a link in the meeting notes to our feature stages documentation, which lists all of the current features that are in development and what stage in development they're in. And if you look at the final column, which is when they got into that stage, a lot of them have been there for a while. So I just did a quick audit and went through and filed tickets for all the ones that seemed like they made sense to promote, with the idea of sort of mentioning it today and sort of getting some consensus, or if this is a feature that's something that you've been interested in or been testing out, especially if it's an alpha. I think the main things we're looking for to go from to beta are that the person who asked for the feature has actually used it and find that it actually solves the problem. Once features are in beta, they're on for everybody, but they can still be turned off. And so what we're looking for to go from beta to stable is that it hasn't broken anybody's deployments, right? So once a feature goes from alpha to beta and it's on, if it breaks you in some way, you can flip the feature flag and turn it off to make things continue working as they were before. Once we go from beta to GA, that's no longer possible. So what we're looking for to go from beta to stable is that they're not breaking anybody. So there are a number of things here. I think I sorted them in the meeting notes based on the first set of ones are ones going from beta to stable. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, which is graceful termination, SDK graceful termination, custom fleet autoscaler sync interval, the state allocation filter, and safe to evict. Those have all been beta for a couple of releases now. It seems like from my gandering at the issues that they're all ready to move up to stable. And then the 3 that are currently in alpha that it would be nice to turn on by default so that everybody is using them are the split controller extensions, pod host name, and resetting metrics on delete. I think out of those 3, the first one is probably the one that might impact people because when we split controller extensions, it's actually changing our deployments. We're going to be running an extra pod or 2 in your cluster. This actually has a number of benefits though, and I think we're going to end up there anyway, so I don't see any reason to wait. This gives us much higher reliability on the Agones control plane and does allow us to scale out the Agones controller from 1 to many if we want to, from 1 to more than 1, which is great in terms of things like upgrades and resiliency and node failure, time to recovery and so forth. So, with that sort of diatribe over, I filed issues for all of these. If people want to follow up with any specific one, please go chime in on the issue. We'll use lazy consensus for moving forward, and the ones that we're particularly excited about pushing from, you put a note, that one's already moved to beta. So I missed one. Apparently, since I wrote this list, we've already promoted one.
Yeah, it wasn't on the where are we? It wasn't attached to the issue, the PR. So I just closed that. And actually, let me throw it on screen too, so that we have
Okay, the documentation is also out of date then. Because if you look up the feature docs link that's linked from the top there, it says that it's still in alpha.
That's great.
But no, it should be. It should be because the one that is here is still in alpha. But if we look in the
131 or whatever we're on.
If I pop over to the development docs and look at feature stages,
then it says beta.
Should say wherever it is. Somewhere.
Feature stages.
It's sorted by.
Yep.
Yes, there it is, beta. Yeah, that's the development. Yeah, because we hide it because feature gates.
Yes, awesome. All right, well, thank you for catching that one. We'll cross that one off the list.
I think the only thing that gives me pause about any of this is it does seem like a lot of users tend to stay on one version and then jump much later. And so I don't know how to properly get signal off of the feature gates. So I think SDK graceful termination as an example is probably fine because 118 is like a
Yep.
year and a half old or something. But like the ones that have been since 130, I don't know what the right answer is. And similarly, like I don't know if we can figure out a right answer without, I think that's the reason that lazy consensus has to be the way we go, and kind of telegraphing in these meetings, like, by the way, we're doing this.
Yeah. I have
Yeah, I think
zero
for
problems with any of these.
for people that are jumping releases, like even like all the ones that are going up to stable, except for Safe to Evict, have been there for quite a while. So even people that are jumping releases, hopefully have jumped into a release where this is already
Right.
on by default.
Yeah.
And if not, then they might have to run an old release while we figure out what bug got introduced, which has definitely happened before. So
Yeah.
I note that it is again like 7 Googlers and Steven. So
Steven has a lot of power here. I'm just saying.
Well, we're on 130 now, so we'll see.
oh, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's pretty good. What was I gonna say? I think like my thing. I think these are all fine, especially because that's been beta for so long. This is basically been end-to-end tested and isn't really actually a backwards. Like it's not a breaking change in terms of API or anything. It's just providing more stuff. This I think a lot of people are already using. And this one, since there's an option to always turn it off, I think that's also okay. So that would be all right. I'll write notes on the tickets, but that would be my thing. Oh, and we lost Robbie.
I think we can move on to Max's. It sounds like we dispatched that topic.
That's good.
Max, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So the thing I want to talk about is like design proposal to basically expose some a status for the fleet to indicate whether it's it's in a rollout complete state or not. The background is that right now we don't have like such a indicator in the fleet to tell user or some third party CI orchestrator whether a fleet route is complete or not, especially the case when you use Agones with Cloud Deploy. When you trigger a rollout through Cloud Deploy, you will see through UI or CLI, you will see that the Cloud Deploy route is immediately finished after you submit command. Either no matter whether the fleet route is actually finished or not. So the general design idea is pretty straightforward, which we will I propose to integrate with another open source library, which is called KStatus, which provide some standard status which can be understood by Cloud Deploy. So basically, what we will do is in our fleet status, we including a reconciling condition to tell whether the fleet is still in reconciling state, and KStatus will take this input and compute and output some standard status which can be understood by Cloud Deploy. The open question I have is that how we define the completion of a fleet rollout. I think by definition, we should define the completion as there is no like old version of game server running in this fleet, which is similar as the definition of a deployment rollout completion. But the issue is that for game server, we have the allocated state. Basically, the allocated game server will not be terminated or scaled down during a rollout process. So this will make the rollout process out of control of the Agones system itself. If customers do not terminate their allocated game server in the old game server set, like for a long period, then if we define the rollout process of fleet completion is like there's no old version game server, then basically the route will never finish or only finish after a very long time after customer manually terminates or somehow terminates their old game server. So I'm not quite sure like how we should define this completion or what's the use case or customers use journey, like how they will use this, what's the real state or real indicator customers care about. Yeah, so that's the major open question I have.
Do you have thoughts? I have thoughts, but you're the I don't want to say token end user here, but you are the end user here. If you wanted to be like, hey, go do a thing when done is enough, what would that look like? Or when would that be?
Yeah, I guess usually immediately I'm interested when I change the fleet, just for the ready servers once they've obviously been updated. I'm less concerned about the allocated ones. I might want to do some, I don't know, if I could do a thing, it would be once the ready ones have been updated and then maybe later on allocated. But I think, yeah, we have that exact use case where like after updating a fleet, it might not, the allocated servers might take a day to recycle. Yeah, it would be nice to actually override that for some of the fleets as well, to kill the allocated servers during that rollout. But that's probably a different problem.
My next thing, we'll talk about that. Well,
the thing that gives me pause about just the ready servers and allowing the allocated to continue is that at the very least, like, and I obviously come from a more traditional like web services thing, but like wanting to know that the binary deployment is like fully rolled out is sometimes necessary for things like dependency management. So if you have like binary A that uses some backend service, or like version 1 that uses a backend service and version 2 doesn't, and you want to know, hey, I can actually drain that backend service now. That's the case where you really want the allocated servers to be relayed as well.
Well, actually, that's a really interesting point, Zach. Should the litmus test almost be, has a new game server gone from ready to allocated and had someone play on it, and therefore we know it's okay?
Oh,
because that's literally your point, right? Like in a traditional web service manner, you would roll out part of it and see if it's still working. But the only way to test the game server is actually to have someone play on it.
I was more talking about like if I were trying to drain a backend service, like eliminate it completely.
Yeah.
The thing that I want to know is that the binary that uses it is no longer there. But what you're talking about is actually interesting in a different way, which is which is canarying, which I honestly is like a more interesting feature, or not more interesting, but it's a different feature, right?
Well, like, it's not necessarily canarying. I'm just thinking about it when like when is a fleet rollout done enough, right? Like enough, right? Like, because I think that's the word. Because in theory, you could have a fully allocated fleet. If you had a completely full cluster, like probably has not, like you may have some buffer, which would be ideal, right? So we may assume some buffer. You could argue that if you had one ready game server, that's enough of the new type, maybe. I think you could argue if all of them were replaced from everything, like the old game server set's gone and like everything in between is gone. I think you could also argue. Actually, no, I'm going to rescind it. I think my idea of like if what's the word I was going to say? If it's played on, it's a valid rollout because it works. Because I think you're right. I think that's canarying, and if you want to do that, that has to be a different approach. Yeah. No. Okay. No. Yeah.
Actually, so Max, this is like a single condition getting relayed, right? There's basically like a rollout done condition. Is that right? I can't remember.
Yes. So basically, it has the reconciling condition. We give its value like false or true to indicate whether it's like still in progress or not.
So one option, and I think Mark already said something like this in the ticket or in the doc,
Somewhere.
might be just to provide configuration as to which thing you want to roll out reconciling to be tied to.
Yeah.
A way to accomplish that might actually be to relay both conditions and have actually like three, like what I would say is like have a three-way so that you can have, call it maybe, you know, reconciling done and reconciling all and reconciling ready or something like that. And then there's a configuration value as to which one of those two conditions the actual like case status reconciling condition is. So that like reconciling condition would just be equal to one of the two values. But then, so case status would be able to pick up the reconciling depending on whatever configuration you wanted. But if you wanted to have like custom logic on the other condition, you could just write a controller that was looking for that condition too. I don't know if that made any sense or if that's overly complicated.
So basically, we dedicated the definition of the criteria to customer. They input whatever they care about.
And we come up with a sensible default. Maybe we make the default conservative and reconcile all of them. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if it's like either a number or a percentage of ready of the new version, if that makes sense. If you were like, we say we're done when you either like, this is how many. So 100% would mean the whole thing. 10% would mean that, or you just like 5. Make sure there's 5 ready, or 2 or 1, whatever it happens to be. Default could either be 1 or 100%. I actually don't really care. Probably one of those would be sufficient.
Do you think it's enough to only think about the new version of game server? Do customers really care about like the clean up process of the old game server? Because I'm thinking about the case, maybe they care about the resource of the old game server consuming. So like how many old game server is already clean up?
I would say that is why this is a thing. Which I just need to drop the docs on pretty much to have as a thing. So that'll update.
Yeah.
Game servers in allocated state can update to fleet updating. So once they have that, then you can be like, oh, okay, if I have an updated label or annotation that I know about, then I know that my fleet's updated and I should shut down more readily than anything else.
Okay.
Stephen, did any of that make sense considering you're the end user here? We're going to ask you that.
Yeah, I think either way is fine. I guess as long as the command line isn't hanging while we wait for the fleet to be updated for a day. We have to Control C and then.
No, so none of that's going to change like a kubectl apply or like a CI thing. It's more about if you go back and look at the resource and say like, is it done, or does like another process go and look at it and there's a condition on it that says like, yes, I'm done.
I mean, this can all be derived from, in many ways, this is just nicety to integrate with like case status, right? Because this can all be derived from game server sets today. Is that correct?
It's tricky, I think.
Sure.
So
as with everything.
I'll say, Zach, to your question earlier about whether it's overly complicated, I feel like it might make sense to, like, we have a great way to sort of extend how we set this condition once we have the condition in place. If we pick one way to do it to start, which we think is reasonable, we know how we could add stuff later if people actually need it. But it almost feels like we're over designing if we're adding a whole bunch of stuff that we think people may need in the future or might want to do it slightly differently. Whereas right now that doesn't exist at all. And once people know like, oh, I can now plug into case status or I can hook this up to my Jenkins or whatever, then they might start asking for things that we haven't thought of, right? So if we say, let's put the condition in, let people start using it, make it based on something we think is reasonable, and then we know there are ways we can change that condition in the future or give people ways to set it differently, et cetera, we can always add that later. I'm not sure it's necessary to add from the start, especially when Steven's kind of like, like anything would be okay, right? So I think I would err towards putting something in there. We can then, have a demo of using it with case status, of using it with rollouts, explain to people how to use it. And if they say like, oh, you're telling me the wrong signal, then we can make sure we put the right signal in. But we'll give them a signal that doesn't exist at all. And I think we can do that in a much simpler way to start with.
Perfect is the enemy of done.
That was actually why I asked the overly complicated thing, is like similar to when Mark described like percentage, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, we could do all these things, but I am very concerned about introducing API that doesn't seem necessary, because then we have to continue to support it. So
makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would argue to start with something simple.
Yeah.
And then I think we have a great way to extend it if we want to add, here's how you can tweak how this variable gets set through extra conditions and pick which one gets, propagated up, or by specifying, some sort of rules on how this condition gets set or whatever it is. Like that stuff can all be added to the API later.
Also why we have alpha gates.
So I would,
yeah.
Yes. And we can put it behind gates. And yeah, I would argue for starting with something that just lets us know when it's done with some, definition of done that we've picked, and say that that's good enough for now.
Okay.
Then I guess the $1 million question is, oh, sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
I was going to say maybe another complication, but what would happen? Let's say, we do a fleet update, and then, but before it's done, we do another fleet update. Do we need to think about this? What happens on the first one? Is there another event to say it's overridden or?
Yeah, I think that's another interesting case. For the current design, it will only show that the old fleet is still in the reconciling state progress. So no difference, like whether it's like override to a new fleet rollout or something else. Yeah.
I guess you'll never get it done. Basically, there are cases where you never get it done. So I mean, that's fine with me.
So then, okay. So what is the basic done that we want to start with?
I think both you and Stephen expressed that just doing the ready game servers seems to be the intuition you both have. So I say let's roll with that, as y'all are actually probably more experts than we are at this point.
The only edge case in that scenario is, what if you have no ready ones? I don't know what the right answer was there, but
I mean, then you're done. Every new game server that comes up is going to be is going to be your new deployment. So
I guess at that point, as soon as you have at least a single ready game server, you're like, cool, we're done. Maybe. Pick a direction. Probably actually doesn't matter.
Okay.
You can always adjust.
Okay, so the takeaway for me is that we will start from simple. The basic condition at start is that the new game server set have one ready game server, then we call it's done. Does it make sense? Did I miss something?
Depending, what was it? Did you say either as soon as the new game server set has one ready game server, we're done? Or did we say that whenever the old ready game servers that are ready get replaced, it's done? If that makes sense. Or is it something in between?
Well,
I'm going to draw pictures.
it could be and, right? Like we need at least one new ready and one
Ooh, I like that.
and all of the ones that are all of the ones in the old version that are previously ready are drained, right? Although that's starting to get into that canarying territory too. Like, how do you handle the case where the new binary just doesn't come up? Does it stay permanently in reconciling, which is an interesting signal in its own right?
Yeah, actually, the if it doesn't come up, the rolling update should actually abort. There's some stuff in there about that.
Oh, I see. So we already kind of do that.
We already kind of do that anyway.
Okay.
I'm writing an audit trail. Getting done. Tell me if anyone disagrees with this. At least one ready. Server. Better way of saying that. Only allocated? Is that a better way of phrasing it? That.
Maybe only allocated and reserved game server from previous game process.
Good point. Yep, I like it. Good about reserved.
That sounds good to me. Max, how's it look to you?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Actually, say radio allocated.
Yeah.
Or be very specific about it because it could move fast, and so that's pretty reasonable. It's like after ready. I think game server has like an after ready function on it already. All right, sweet.
Cool.
I like it.
I like to put my name here.
I did. Well, you're the one who's been doing all the work, and so thank you very much for doing all that work to work out what's going on here.
Well, actually, I recently backed off a little, and Max did the last couple of days of investigation. But
Thank you to both of you then.
yeah, so the EDE tests have been very flaky recently. I did find there's a GKE, seemingly a GKE product issue that's been affecting some of it, and I don't have. We've still been working through that internally. I actually need to get some time to look at our internal repro of it and work with teams here. But we think that I think it has a workaround in the EDEs that's already present in main. Max took the most recent run at this, and it is a very broad set of failures that all kind of seem to be failing in different ways, and we don't have a handle yet on what's going on. And then Max, I think you said it actually cleared up for a little while, so it's kind of weather related or.
Not sure, but starting from yesterday, it's getting better.
Okay. So
Stuff's happening and we don't know why. The worst kinds of bugs.
Yeah. Stephen, I hope this is inspiring a lot of confidence. And
Is it still primarily seeming to happen on certain types of clusters? Like, is it mostly autopilot, or are we seeing it everywhere? Because I know the N10 test can be a little flaky at times anyway.
Max, did you?
Yeah, mostly autopilot, and I think autopilot 126 is a majority of them.
Interesting.
Okay. That's good to know.
And that's on the timing of resources and autopilot would probably make things a bit tough on us.
That big query table that I set up might make it fairly trivial to see where the EDE test failures are. Like whether there is really a cluster on the autopilot side. So it might be, I'll see if I can poke some cycles into that soon. And then separate from the EDEs, Max, didn't you call it yesterday that there was like the SDK conformance test just started flaking?
No,
Did it just
I don't think that's a flake because I think that test only somehow is stuck by on one of the PR. So I didn't see that in the other builds of other PRs.
Oh, okay. Was it
Okay.
was it
I wonder if
Ivy's
it's
PR in particular?
No, not Ivy's.
Oh, okay.
I went and had a look. I couldn't see which test was failing. Is it the C# one?
Rust. I think it's Rust.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes the C# one fails because we use the hash as the version ID, and sometimes it complains about the format of the version ID. And so, like, if you send a new commit, it fixes itself, and it's been around for ages.
Hey, Mark, do you have a bug for that? We have an internal fix-it coming up, and I was thinking that was actually a cheap item to try to fix.
Like,
You've mentioned the fix several. You've mentioned a fix for it several times, and
yeah. Oh, yep. Here we go.
I just want to memorialize like what to do because I don't have any intuition.
Oh wait. Oh, we have a bug for C# conformance test, but we absolutely do. We have that as a thing. Here we go. Yeah, I found it. I found the one.
Because that particular test has been us several times, and the most infuriating part of it is when I see the flake. I intuitively just go and hit the retry build button, and it doesn't work. Which wastes me another like hour and 2 hours or whatever. Or actually less time because it fails early for that one, but still.
Yeah, it's probably like if you just put a letter or something in front of or at the end or something at the version string, it would be fine.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that would be a good one to just get rid of because it's kind of a nuisance.
Yeah, I think I have it. I'm just looking at what was the thing. I think it's what happens is if the hash just happens to have only numbers in it, it complains.
So you asked kind of a more general question of how to get confidence back. Max and I have been talking about using some bandwidth during this fix-it to try to, like, I've been trying to work on those kind of reports on flaky builds and EDE flakes. I think between that and then also improving like how we either fan the logs out or like.
Yeah, the logs are hard to read in a lot of places too. That's absolutely
The
true.
problem is they're hard to read, but they're like when you need the data, you need the data. When you don't need the data, it's noise, right? And so right now it's hard to discriminate is probably the way to say it.
Yeah. And there's also a good conversation in there about like what works for us versus what works. Like we can get through all the cloud builds, but like anyone else who's submitting PRs probably can't do that, or at least as well as we can.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so maybe there's some ideas we could take forward to try to help with that. You know, one idea that I had on kind of related to your logging complaint is if we had some way to dump artifacts out that were not just I mean, we obviously like can push images, but maybe we, take an input of the GCS log bucket and we separately, like at the end of the EDE runs, like copy all the verbose logs out to the
cloud build doesn't have like a finally, which is super annoying.
Right. And like, that's the thing is like, I've thought about that before. And it's like, okay, well, I have to figure out how to structure that. And maybe it would go in that bash script that Max already has for like fanning out the builds. You could then like kind of bring together all the stuff and then dump the logs out. But like, that's how we handle it internally is like when our internal builds fail, like we often have a whole set of like different log files to look through.
Yeah, like
and that
go look over here when it fails or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if we had such a like a per test ground, I could also then like I once had Aaron turn on the Helm debug logs because his build kept failing during Helm install. But the Helm debug is like 20 times bigger than our EDE logs, and I was like, oh, that's not going to work in general. And it'd be nice if like I could just do that and then redirect standard error to somewhere else, so that we always
Somewhere
have the Helm debug logs available, because there is like a 1 in 20 or 1 in 50 flake or something where we just we try to run the Helm install on E to E and it fails, and it's like, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to debug that because I don't have anything to go on. So there's an idea running around there somewhere of like, okay, maybe we just have a way to get more artifacts out of the build. Maybe that's an interesting request for cloud build of like, how is this pattern supposed to work? Is there a way that like a build container can, specify like an artifact directory of this, and then
I think the answer is going to be we have to roll it ourselves into our scripts, which is not ideal, but
right. Then
yeah.
maybe that's an interesting feature request for them of like, make it easy so that when a container wants to dump artifacts, they just dump it or they have a designated location, and then like
goes
cloud
there.
build copies it out of the container.
Yep.
I don't know. So something to think about.
As a maybe silly question, does it make sense to just increase the number of retries we have on our end-to-end tests?
So I've been doing a little bit of picking on that too.
Yeah.
Just for context of anyone listening, like 4 months, I don't remember how long ago, I changed it so that we retry our end-to-end tests using this package called Go Test Some.
Which is super nice.
Yeah, it's an interesting package in that it basically just runs go test just JSON, and that like is basically just a harness around go test JSON that then looks at whether the test failed or not and reruns the tests. It is conservative when a test panics, which is why sometimes you see E to E runs where you'll see like a panic as one of the first failures.
Oh,
And
I
then
see.
And then you'll see a bunch of like unknown tests, because on the panic, the test harness takes out like all of the other tests, and so you'll see Go report them as unknown. It's kind of weird behavior. But Go Test Some says, oh, there was a panic here.
That's like severe, so don't retry that.
And doesn't retry at all.
That makes sense. That actually makes sense.
So I've been doing some light scrubbing anytime I see something like that. Like I sent a PR to Max on Monday where, like, for example, we have a slew of tests. I actually just fixed like a dozen of them in the fleet tests where they were using like assert not nil or assert nil on errors, but then they would just continue on. So I changed them all to requires.
Old tests. Yeah.
In a funny case where require is actually the right thing versus like that weird other case we found where require. So like I've been kind of gradually looking at those cases because they prevent reruns.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense.
If we wanted to, maybe as part of the fix it again, like if we wanted to have like a concerted effort to kind of audit the tests and figure out like, just bang through and say, make sure that like if you hit an error and you're also taking a pointer to an object, like you stop there because you're about to look at it and panic. Like that could be something we do. On the other hand, handling it kind of piecemeal as they come up is not the end of the world either.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The other thought I had in my head that you've probably already thought of. I had a look, especially thinking of like autopilot. Does it make any sense as well to insert a delay of some kind? But I guess it doesn't really matter. If you wanted to do that, you could just increase the number of retries.
So like early on in the autopilot side, I actually did change. There's a framework. Most of the calls that wait for resources, like wait for a ready game server, etc., go through
takes a while anyway. Yeah.
Go through like a framework retry of some sort, like wait for ready, blah blah blah. And there's kind of just now there was like a hard coded like 5 minutes, and I think I bumped that to like 10 minutes for autopilot. early on, just because.
Yep. Makes sense.
I'm not like. I would like to know if that's what is causing it, because that I inserted that just for the any flakiness around the nodes coming up, or rather any like, you know, the P90 on a node starting on autopilot might be above 5 minutes. I'm not sure. It's not always, but it's
it can happen.
It can happen.
Yep.
So, but autopilot could be causing us some other problem, and that's what I'm
the hard one
wondering.
to work out. Yeah.
And the other part is that, and this is, you know, kind of what we're trying to work through internally as well, is that our standard clusters are very standard clusters. Like they're pretty much like the bog standard configuration if you were just to run the defaults. But autopilot. What was that?
When you say bog standard, you mean standard Kubernetes? Is that what you're saying?
So autopilot has much more of the kind of fancy features for GKE. It has, you know, workload identity. It's running data path v2. It's running like all of the features, because those are the features we think that, you know, people should be running anyways. And so, like, you know, whether it's autopilot or whether it's like ABCD feature is unknown at this point. And we may be seeing like issues with some other feature that we could probably reproduce on standard as well. So
makes sense. The other, so we were talking about the other thought I had. I know the test framework we're using that I've just blanked on the name of outputs a report of flaky tests from memory, or tests it retried. Are we doing anything with that report? Are we putting it anywhere? Do we care?
We are not right now, but actually that was the reason I set up the
logging stuff.
Yeah, like we're now logging to a BigQuery sync so that I can do some analysis, like post hoc analysis on it. And that was actually one of the reasons, was I was going to try to have it output in some funny way that I could pick up in that. But yeah.
Cool. Those are all my questions.
Yeah, like right now that one report does an inference on like whether it was an internal retry. It also tries to make an inference on, have I ever seen, as an example, have I ever seen this commit pass on this configuration at all? So if someone actually went and retried the entire build, it says, you know, oh, I have seen, you know, hash ABC 123 pass on autopilot 126 before, ergo if anything fails it must be a flake. So like we have several layers of possible retries that can all kind of come into play there. But we need to, I need to brush that off and actually make sure it's like kind of useful. I did that as a Friday afternoon project and then haven't touched it since then.
Got it. Makes sense.
We should probably move on to your thing if
the other stuff.
Yeah. I was just realizing we only have 10 minutes left.
Oh boy. Mine's pretty easy. I just need to push up the docs and then that's done. I actually have the docs. I just need to push them up.
Oh, so is this just a FYI?
Just an FYI, just letting people know it's coming. I actually finally finished it. That was really it.
Cool.
The functionality is all there, and it's improved and it's gone through. It's behind an alpha feature gate, so yes, we'll have that functionality around. Just once the whatchamacallit, the case status stuff comes through for the mechanisms for rollouts, people will be able to do a bit of both, which is nice.
Awesome. So we now have, moving on to the last topic, we now have a robot that will, do you remember the timing criteria. It marks things stale after. Oh, Gita, you're here. Do you wanna talk to that part?
Yeah, so basically, if the issue is not is inactive for more than 30 days, it will start marking the issues stale. Then wait for another 30 days. If there is no activity, then it will mark it as obsolete. And if still inactive, then it will close it. So we activated this GitHub action this month. So there are around 7-8 issues that got marked as stale. Because we don't want to mark all of them at once because it will be too much to handle. So some of them, I think, mark them as we still need it, and he added that awaiting maintainer label so that it will not be, it will be excluded from monitoring. So right now there are another 5 issues that are marked as stale. So do we want to take a look at those, or what should we do?
So, I think Max proposed that in this meeting we could actually just triage the stale issues, and we could probably just insert this as an ongoing thing, Mark, if that sounds reasonable to you.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Because then we'll always just have a process of every month we go through and try to make sure the stale issues have some sort of like, if we're gonna close them, we at least do it publicly.
Well, we can leave them. We can leave them to go to obsolete, and then like they can just
Sure,
roll
sure.
through the process if we don't. Yeah.
I think that you're right, that the meeting should probably be, if anything obvious looks like it should be marked as a waiting maintainer like you've already
Yeah.
done. So are you presenting right now? Do you want to pull up the?
Here you go.
Oh, you want? Yeah, so there they are.
I just figured
Yeah,
it was
there's only
easier
5.
than-
I think we could do it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
So on this first one,
Five.
you want to start from the top or the bottom?
All right, let's. There you go. I've got them all open in tabs.
So this is actually interesting because I think there are multiple solutions to this problem now. I think when this was filed, those didn't exist or we didn't know about them. So I think for UDP game servers, we can use Quilkin, and then you can use nodes that have an external IP. And
Yep.
for TCP game servers, we know that you can use Trafic and you can use nodes that have an external IP. So we actually have solutions for this. I think really the ask at this point is just to sort of document and or put together a demo of how to use them. So we can either leave this open and say that these are the 2 solutions. We'll close this with documentation, or we can close this with, I already dropped a comment on here a while back about Quicken. We can add a note about Trafic if you want to do TCP and kind of leave it up to folks to find and or discover those solutions through the issue. So I think either way would be fine. If we want to leave this as a documentation tracking issue, I'm okay leaving it open, or we can just kind of let it close on its own.
Yeah, and especially for this issue, I think Robert had already added stale label. That's why it has got obsolete label. So it will get closed in next 30 days if it is not addressed. So do we want? Is that okay?
I'm not against changing this to document Quilkin or other options. I would just change the issue title and then put an awaiting maintainer or whatever on it, or we close it, or we leave it. I honestly like.
We do have another issue around documenting WebSockets. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. So there's this one. There's an add integration pattern WebSocket. So that does exist already as a ticket with a bunch of different stuff on it. We have some of this. I'd love to see like the Trafic stuff as well, and maybe some other things. But
the question is whether they belong documented here as like kind of an officially sanctioned thing for Agones, or whether like, I mean, obviously Trafic's probably not going to host it on theirs, but Quilkin probably already has an integration guide for Agones.
Yeah, right? I'm wondering if. Oh, that's what I'm looking for. sort of some, like, it could just be a pointer here, really.
Yeah.
As a third-party example or something, like, hey, there's a thing, there's other things you can do.
That might be an easy way to dispatch it.
Yeah. Oh, I do that. Let's where's what I was looking for? Buckets. So to this out examples or docs.
That seems good.
Good. Comment. Labels. What did that just do? That's not what I wanted. Interesting. Assume I need to remove those. Nope. Oh, no, no. Do what I want. Actually, I will just take those. So I can just take those off, and if we don't do that, it will come back with a stale and remind us. Is that better, or should I make it? Or should I make it a waiting maintainer?
I mean, I think unless you want to keep going through this again, like, I think we should put it in a waiting maintainer and have a separate process for making sure we're not hoarding those.
Yeah, this could be a good. Actually, this is a good first issue probably because it's a docs issue. And let's add those as well since we're here.
Is it something that Kalai can, since you added it as first code issue, is this something Kalai can help
Yeah.
you guys with?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. You want to take a look at it, Kalai?
Sure, Geeta, I'll take it.
Okay.
No, not me. Don't assign me. That's not what I wanted. I hit the wrong button. I'm doing well with the typing today. Done. All right. I think that sounds good. All right. Let's go to the next one. Share this instead. So this is about passing arbitrary metrics from game server to open census. I was thinking let this just pass through.
Yeah.
And let the system, unless someone immediately. We
agree
have some
with that.
coverage unit counts and lists, and also I just don't think it's something we should be worrying about. Also, it seems like the common pattern I've absolutely seen is everyone just does log-based metrics out of their game servers, which is legit.
If we
After
want
setting
to
up-
close it, is there any reason to just let it pass through versus just closing it now since we're discussing it? I feel like we should just close it.
Then the cold hand of a robot closes it instead.
That is funny. I have no strong opinions either way. I could flip a coin. I don't care.
Go ahead and close it.
All right. Let's close this. It's inactive. You will not be fixing that. Okay.
Does the robot automatically add the won't fix label? I
Yeah.
assume.
I
Okay.
think so. Yes. Yeah. Because we talked about that, Gita. Remember? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We did. Yeah. It's a good little robot.
Should not include generated for protos it doesn't own.
This
Has
is
there been any activity on this?
really old. I was gonna let this flow through just because I don't know if it's important and I don't know enough about C++ to be like yay or nay. So I figured if somebody really cares, they'll chime in, and if they don't, then they won't.
I think the issue here is if you do what they're saying, you get a diamond pattern where some things end up built with one set of headers and the other things end up built with another set,
Yeah.
and bad things happen. But yeah, ODR.
We are at time though.
I'm okay letting it pass.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one cares enough right now.
Gonna let that flow through.
I realize we're at time. Are there any of these that someone wants to speak for? Otherwise, they probably will just pass on to.
This one I think should just pass through. We got asked about this a lot in the past. I don't think legacy. There probably had more legacy game servers. I don't think that happens nearly as much. But I figured it seems like a good one to see if somebody complains about.
Huh. Weird.
Legacy game servers. They have a thing. Security best practices.
Didn't someone just put up a PR that was in like a security space and
They did, and then I gave them feedback, and they never did anything. But it was someone who was pinging me directly and wanted to start doing stuff. It wasn't bad. It just we needed the CLA stuff and put it in the right spot in the docs and just some cleanup. But it wasn't terrible. But I also wonder whether we could actually just be like, go look at these Kubernetes docs and do what they say.
Like I honestly wonder if that's our purview, because it seems easier just to say, look, like we don't host those docs here.
There is some other stuff around certifications for allocators and stuff like that maybe we should talk about. But yeah, that's.
We could definitely publish like what our RBAC rules do and stuff like that. But like the general concept of like containerization and like how RBAC works and like you know how certs work and.
So just leave it and see if anyone responds.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
All right. That's it. That's everything.
Cool.
We are over time.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.